All right, so we're going to look at some string methods. Write a method that accepts a string as a parameter and returns a string that reverses the order of the original one. Call the method above twice from main, each time printing the output to check its validity. And then after 2 calls, we should get back what we started with. So what I want to do is jump over to Eclipse and sort of set up my main commenting for the program, and sort of the structure around the passing of the parameters for the initial function, and then we'll come back onto paper and look at the logic of reversing the order of the string. Okay, so over here in Eclipse, I'll do a new class. Again, I'm still in chapter 3, and I'm going to call this string methods. And the first letter of the class name is capitalized, and then also each subsequent letter of each new word, just to make it easy to read. Okay, I'll put a block commenting with our name, your name. The date. Class. And a description of what the program does. Program exemplifies string methods. We could just leave it at that. I mean, you know, we're going to do this, write a method that accepts a string as a parameter and returns a string that reverses the order of the original one. But we're going to be using string methods to do that. String as an object has both data, the text that we see, and the ability to have methods attached to it, and that's the dot things that go along with it. So I'm going to import java.utilities. You know, and I could just, if I wanted to, I could just import the scanner here. Some of you may have done that, and it's going to give me a warning that I'm not using that scanner yet. It's fine. We're going to use it in a minute. In fact, since, well, the original instruction says that the method that we're going to call just has a string as a parameter. So let's call the method reverse string. And I'll just set up the function call and set up the header of a generic public static void method. And what this does is it resolves sort of one issue at a time. Oh, see it right there, I have a syntax error. I don't have my semicolon. We're resolving one issue at a time. So that issue is resolved. Then the problem says that it should send a string as a parameter. So we don't have a string yet to send. So where's that string going to come from? Well, let's just set up a string here. String, let's call it temp equals quote temp string. Maybe all lowercase, temp string. So this is a string that I'm using to test this program reverse string. Eventually what I could do is use the last program that we wrote and use that getLine method that will return a line of code, and that would be a string that we could use from user input. So I'll do that after. Okay, but we'll start with reverse string. And then, so reverse string wants us to send a parameter, so we're going to send it this temp string here, temp. And then up here, it's going to want us to say, okay, you need to say you're going to get a string in here. And so now I actually would prefer to use temp in here. So I don't want to use the same word everywhere. So let's go back down here and let's call this this one like maybe, so we can undo. I can use the rename and that'll change this one everywhere at its scope. Refactor, rename. Let's call it phrase, P-H-R-A-S-E. Hit enter and it'll change both those within that scope to phrase, but it left this one alone as temp, which is fine because this is a temporary one here. But I don't actually like that either. I want to call this one I don't know. Let me just see what I did before. I've written this already. Line. Okay. Oops. I did this video already, but I did it without volume, so we're doing it again. So let's call this one line. And it's, you know, it probably is my fault for not actually spending a little more time here. Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay. So we're calling it, we need to accept a line as a string as a parameter, but we also need to return a string. So this is not type void, it's type string, and that's going to create another error. And so we need to return it. In this case, I will just return an empty string to begin with. Just setting up the scope of the passing of parameters. And then notice if I'm returning a string here, I'm not saving it. So if I want to save it, I have to save it somewhere, and we'll save it in a new string called reverse. Or how about phrase 2? I can tell I'm getting tired because I'm having a hard time naming things. So that just means my creative, the brain's not working. And this happens, you know, you get so tired of looking at code that everything looks the same and you're like, ah. So that's natural. Usually what I would do is maybe take a little break, come back and be like, oh, okay, this is not, I'm just in the weeds because I'm not thinking clearly. Okay. You can see right away, this is confusing. We have a phrase here, and then we have a phrase 2. So maybe, again, I'm going to change this to I'm actually going to change this original phrase. And this is going to make more sense. I'm going to change it to the word temp string. And I'm going to change this one to the word reverse string. No, just reverse. Reverse order. And maybe we don't have this function be called reverse string. Maybe we just call it reverse. So, and then we could call this reverse string. Okay, I know that seems crazy, but notice what happened is it actually makes more sense. We have a temporary string that we're getting from the user. We're reversing it, and we're getting a reverse string out. So the one thing that you could do is you could change this method name to reverse order if you wanted. That would make more sense. And all of the words, all of the names have more meaning now. So I know that was probably hard to keep up with. Maybe just pause and do it, and then you'll be on track with it. Okay. How are we going to do this is the question. So everything's set up correctly. Notice these warnings are saying, you know, you're not using this reverse string. I'm not using this anywhere because I haven't done anything with it. So I could print it in the next line and that would use it. So what we're going to do is try to figure out how we're going to reverse this string line up here in this method. And first I'm going to pause so I can take that little break that I mentioned. Okay, so the question is, how do we take this temp string and reverse the order of the elements in the string? So we're going to use our string methods to do that. So I just want to look at on paper for a minute, and this is kind of something you might do in general to just figure out what things should look like. So we have this temporary string, or it actually is temp space string. So that's the line that's coming in to the method. And then what does the output look like when it leaves the method? So we might figure this out on paper first so that we can kind of see what we need to do. That output would be GNI RTS space. You might kind of make a space here as an underscore. PMET. Gnurst Pemet. Okay, that's temp string. Or I think I called it test string, didn't I? Shoot. Oh, temp string, perfect. Okay, so a couple of things. Notice how long this string is. So what we need to do is, well, there's different ways to do this, but one way to do it is to start here with the G, and you do it one letter at a time, loop through the string, the indices here, the indices of the line, starting at G, and take the character there and add it on to some output string that we have, a reverse string here. So the question is, where is the G? At what index is it in? So, when we talk about strings, each position is indexed by an index, but starting at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So G is in index 10, but the length of this line is 11. So we want to start at the 10th index, and we want to take each of those values, the character at that value, and add it starting with G, and then we'll take this result here, and each time we'll start with the result. So initially it's just an empty string, but each time we'll add the new letter to it. So initially we'll start with nothing and we'll add G, and then we'll decrease that index to 9, and result will now be G, and we'll add N, and then we'll decrease the index again to 8, and then we'll take the GN and we'll add that next variable I to it until we've looped through the whole line. So that's the logic. And let's jump back over to Eclipse. And again, just doing it on paper just helps us sort of figure out what's going to happen in our brain. So I'm going to make a loop for, and now I'm going to use integer. So I could use I, but let's actually use the word index because it'll help us understand what we're doing. I want to start at the line.length. But that's a little too long, so I have to take 1 away from that, -1. And we're going to go down. So we're going to go down until that index is 0. So that index needs to be greater than or equal to 0 is the test. And then the index each time is going to decrease by 1. And then we're going to open that up. And that gets rid of that error that we saw there. That error had nothing to do with the previous line, but it was confused what was going on there. Outside of this loop, we need to set up our sort of reverse string. So we need to know where we're going to keep this string. String, let's call it reversed. Let's just be descriptive. Reversed line equals, can I use temp line? Can I use temp string? Let's use reversed line. Let's just use the variable temp. String temp equals nothing. Okay, so now in this loop, I have to do that outside the loop because I want to return the temp. So this temp has to exist outside the loop. If we define it within the loop, we won't be able to use that string outside the loop. So within the loop, we want to make a new assignment for temp. We want temp to equal temp plus line dot character at index, which is already filling this in for me. So we're going to have that index decrease, and each time we decrease it, we're going to add that character to temp. And then we're going to return temp. So, to see what's happening, we might put a print statement in here, system.out. Or print line statement, where we're printing temp as we go. That would help us sort of see what's happening through the loop. So if you put the print statement within the loop, it shows you what the loop is doing. And we can see G, then GN, then GNIR, and it actually ends up being all of the letters started, if we go from right to left, temp string. So it's working. That's good. Then I can take that print statement out of there, out of the loop. Notice my return statement is also out of that loop. And I could put the print statement right before the return statement. Now that's going to just print the last thing, which again is what we want. Notice if I put the print statement after the return statement, it gives me an error. It does not like that because the method should end at the return statement. What happens if I take that print statement and I put it in main? So after we've returned it. Again, I have an error because it's going to say temp cannot be resolved. It doesn't know what temp is here because temp only exists within this method. So instead, we need to print whatever got returned here, which is this reverse string. Now we can run it. There it is. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I want to make this, so this problem says then call the method twice, each time printing the output to check its validity, and after 2 calls you should get back what you started with. So if we wanted to call this method again, we would sort of copy these 2 lines of code. Well, not really. We would call the method again, and the method is called reverse. But the second time we call it, we would send it, that's a little, see, my naming is just bad. We would send it reverse string. And then we need to assign that somewhere. So I'm going to pause for 1 second. Okay, so again, I'm having issues with my naming. And you can see here that it's causing confusion. So it's causing me to be confused. So I'm sure it's causing some of us to be confused. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of this test temp string here. And I want to get rid of it by using the method that we just did in the scanner object example, which was the method to get a line. So we have a method here, public static string get line, which accepts a console and returns a line of code from the user. So I'm going to copy that out. And I'm going to paste it in here. And if you don't have easy access to that, you could just pause and retype this code. this method, public static string get line, has a scanner as a console. It's going to ask the user for a line of input, and then it's going to save that and return it. And we're going to call that method right here instead of having this assignment for temp string. But to do that, we have to first have an object, a scanner object defined. So scanner, let's call it input, new scanner, system.in. And then instead of having this temp string there, we will call the function getLine and send it this scanner input. Now, it's this word that's causing both these names are difficult because they have the word string in them. And that's hard because string is a data type. And so we have the string here, and then we have a temp string here. And so automatically I have this confusion. So, so we have too many of the use of the word string. So if we did it once, it's probably fine. I switched over to that other code. And this temp string is not really a temporary string. This is the user input. Let's call it use. Oh, gosh, it's so crazy. I have input there. Let's call it the test. Let's pause again. I'm at a little bit of a loss, but I'm going to call it test string. So instead of here having temp string, I'm going to call it test string. And then instead of this guy being called reverse string, let's rename it. So right click, sorry, I gotta not right click. I need to refactor, rename. Let's call this backwards. So we're initially assigning the input to test string. Then we're calling reverse to get a backwards string. Then we're printing it. Then we're calling it again, but that's not going to do anything unless we save that. So instead of saving it, we could just print it like we talked about before, where I just put that in my print statement. And then so it's going to have me get an input. Then it's going to reverse that input, print it. Then it's going to reverse that thing that got reversed and print that all at the same time. All right, so we haven't done the reversal. We did the reversal. We did everything. Okay, let's run it and see what happens. Okay, test input. No, what did I call it? Temp string. And then it reverses it, and then it prints it out again in the reverse order. So then we got back what we started with. I had a third thing on here, which was write a method to determine if your string is a palindrome, meaning it's the same forwards or backwards. You know, we need the dot equals there. So, and we need an if statement. So it's a little beyond where we are, it's where we're going. But I think rather than doing that, what I will do is just, how would we know if it's a palindrome? Well, let's put one in and see what happens. So race car is a palindrome, R-A-C-E-C-A-R. If I enter in race car, it gets reversed to race car, it gets reversed again, it's still race car. Yay. Here's another one that's cool. Rats live on no evil star. When you do it backwards, it's the same as it is when you do it forwards. And so I won't do that. I won't do the testing of whether it's a palindrome because I feel like this video has gone on long enough. What I will do is maybe tighten it all up. So I'm going to tighten this white space up. I'm going to tighten that white space up. I'm going to leave that white space in, and then I'll leave that white space in. So we have a space here, a space there. Notice I don't have any comments. but in a sense, I don't necessarily need them. You know, this is, I can even get rid of this user prompt comment. And the reason this code is sort of self-commenting is the way that we've named these things. Get line is getting a line of code and returning it to the user. Reverse is taking a string and returning the reversal of that thing. Now this maybe could use a little bit of commenting to say, oh, this function accepts a string as input and returns the reverse, a string in the reverse order. You know, you could put a comment in there or not. All right, I think that's it for this video. I'm sorry it got so convoluted. You can see, I mean, I have a lot of experience coding, and you know, when the names, you saw it in my example here, when I started not being clear on what I was calling stuff, sometimes it's just easier to start over. It's not that many lines of code. That's why I stopped and renamed stuff, just so it could be clearer for me. I think when you come back and look at this code, it's more clear now with these new names than it would have been if we had left all the original names that I was using. I don't know that for sure, but you know, especially when you're new, I know this can be an issue, but don't hesitate to just rename something. It can clean the code up considerably. You just have to be careful when you do that you don't just rename it yourself. Go up here and use the refactor, and then use the rename, because it'll rename it everywhere within its scope. All right, so I was able to get the whole code on here in one line. So if you want to look at it, you can pause it, or you can just open it up in Canvas. And again, you can download it to your desktop or to your downloads folder, and then drag it over into this default package, and you can open it up in Eclipse yourself. Or, you know, much better just to do the coding yourself. I'm supplying that code in case you need to go back and compare, but ultimately, if you do the coding and you do it in the order that we're doing it on the video, you're going to be much better off. You're going to learn how to code a lot better. This is the whole idea of an iterative process. You don't just sit down and code well. Nobody does. If you try to do it, you're going to have bad names, you're going to have bad logic, you're going to have icky stuff. And to try to code your way out of the ickiness is difficult. But if your logic is clean to begin with, sort of, my logic here was good on the reversal. My logic of like the passing of parameters and the naming of stuff was not good. So that's actually part of the process. It's the specification step. I skipped it. It's like, what do we want to name stuff? I didn't do that on paper. And then as I coded it, I got all mixed up. All right. Done.